I hope you're having an amazing day. My name is Colin. Today, G4AL Layer 1 gaming blockchain games for a living. I'm here together, Manel Sort, CEO of G4AL, and Andrew Thomas, the advisor for this project. Together, they will give a lot of clarity because obviously a major project with major potential. That's why we're here today to discuss everything that you have in your genius mind, Manel. Thank you for being here, taking the time out of your busy day. Could you give us a little bit of an introduction about who you are, why you chose to bring Andy on board, perhaps, and what G4AL is all about?
So myself, from a professional standpoint, I've been in the games industry for 25 years now. I've worked on many projects. I started on the console gaming industry, then I moved to mobile on the startup Microshocks. In that case, 2 years after I joined the project, we won the award to the second best mobile game in the world for UEFA Champions League 2007. And that triggered the acquisition of the company by Trip Hopkins, who was the founder of Electronic Arts. And there I had the pleasure to work with Trip and Ilka. Ilka is now the CEO of Supercell for 7 years. During that period, I specialized at opening new markets. So I did that in several occasions, like opening the first iPhone market, .com market, Facebook market. Out of all of that period, probably the had different hits, #1 hits worldwide. And the most important one was Millionaire City, as that was the only game that was not from Zynga that made it to the top 5 at the Facebook board. Then after that period, I was going to set up a new startup, but then the guys from King reached me out and convinced me to join them. And I did it so, and I set up King in Barcelona. A couple of years later, we were generating more than $1 million per day at the office in Barcelona.
So they were happy, yeah? They made a good choice.
And we were happy. We were having a really good time with all the developers. It's also the players were having a lot of great experiences with our game, so it was a really nice period. I also helped, when I joined King, one of the first things I did was to transfer know-how about how we were marketing the games as a services at the Barcelona studio that I was managing, and that was the foundation of the way King used for marketing and forecasting the products. We also did a lot of work on entertainment. So if you look for my name, Manel Sort, and Nature Magazine, you'll see that I was in a team of 5 researchers, and we did a lot of research regarding how entertainment can be measured from a scientific standpoint. And that was kind of the state of the art for games as a service. Basically, right now, the model of free-to-play games as a service, I would say, is pretty mastered. We were then acquired by Activision Blizzard, and we did a knowledge transfer to them. And that is why I decided to move on and do other things. I first thought about AI or something like that, but I felt it was not the time yet. And I remember that a friend of mine told me about blockchain in 2012 because he was a miner. And then he was from an old friend from early days, when I was 14 or so. And he had set up all this mining setup. And then at that point, I couldn't see any application on games, but I realized that now it was possible. So I said, okay, let's try something on that. I looked into it, and I really liked, especially all the Ethereum possibilities and so forth. And then as time went by, I finally decided to set up a startup. I started reaching out friends in March last year, and then we started making progress. My overall goal was to say, in the same way that we did pretty much the same in another platform. In that case, was moving the games from premium games to free-to-play games. The idea here is to do now from free-to-play to actually free-to-play with a better return for the users, let's say. And that's what we want to do.
And that's why it's called games for a living.
Correct. And our real goal, as you will see, is to make that a genuine achievable goal, because I believe it's possible. Right. There is some needs on changes on different business models, and there will be a lot of research to be done. But in the same way that back in the time I said, it will be possible to have really good free-to-play games, and people were really, really skeptical. I do believe that it will be possible to have functional and better actual business models thanks to play-to-earn models, okay, that will be superior to what right now is free-to-play games as a service. And not only that, eventually, and that will be later on, it will also be possible to have, and that will take way longer, of course, more than 15 years probably, we'll also be able to have proper decentralized games. But it will be a long journey, it will take time. And we're in the very, very early days on all of that path. And back to what I was saying, like people were joking about me when I moved from the console industry to the mobile games and free to play, etc. They were saying, it's never going to work. We were at, I mean, last company I worked for was Activision Blizzard King. And one of the projects I worked on was Call of Duty. And you could see how all that know-how from free to play was slowly getting applied into what is now Warzone. So now we have Fortnite.
We all know Warzone, unfortunately.
Have so many examples, like the top games basically are free to play. And that was like something people could not even think of just a decade ago.
So that's basically where it all started. Let me recap, because I appreciate your enthusiasm. It's going really fast. So we went from big players like EA Games, you mentioned Activision, Blizzard, King. So that's the company behind Candy Crush, right? Among like their biggest thing. Any numbers you want to throw around on Candy Crush? Because I think when I read your bio, I was like, Candy Crush, okay, that we all know it as like this little mobile game, but we're business people. As soon as we hear the numbers, we're like, oh, Candy Crush. What was that like, those numbers? Because you basically, as far as I understand right now, you broke open that market, right? As the first mover into that space. And then the huge success inevitably was then Candy Crush on the highest level.
Well, to be very concrete, what I did myself, fully 100% myself, was to create Bubble Witch Saga 2 in Barcelona. Okay, that game reached more than 80 million players and was making more than, I think it was about $900,000 per day. Okay, that was 100% done by myself. Then what I did, beyond my, I also released other hits that made several hits, but not at the magnitude of Bubble Witch. I also helped the team that marketed Angus Lovett, actually. First thing I did was when I joined King, I sit next to Angus Lovett, and then I did the knowledge transfer about how we were using a model to market and forecast games for, like, basically how to calculate the lifetime value so that you can optimize for cost per install. And it was a very precise model, and that was the foundation of marketing of Candy Crush, as Angus took that model and then applied it to the marketing. Besides that, I also, with the team here in Barcelona, we did this research that I was mentioning that helped at improving the games, and that generated in a year estimated more than 300 million in terms of return by optimizing the games using that methodology, which is the one that you can check if you look for my name and Nature Magazine. We only publish like about 20-25% of the work done.
It's okay. We're gonna read it
and you can have a look. Yeah.
On the whole thing, right? The Candy Crush, the Bubble Witch Saga, they sound like major successes, right? Why would you leave King? What was the ambition? Was it like you reached your full potential? More ambition?
It's because I'm an entrepreneur. So basically, it's the same reason why all the founders left. What happens that once you become acquired, etc., the return you get from your work is significantly less. You will just earn like a normal executive. And that's what it's the same reason why I left Digital Chocolate after the acquisition after several years. There is a period where the company matures, and it's like right now they are Microsoft. So I will be now an executive at Microsoft. That's not definitely what I mean. The type of the experience and the reward you get for working in a place like that is very different. If you, for me, there is different types. Like the thing, Colin, is like, if you know how to create value, why would you create value for someone else? You know?
True. But so, don't say that too loud. Keep it between us.
No, as an entrepreneur, you know, like
true.
If you have that talent, then you feel like you want to work for yourself, and that's what you end up doing. Now, what happens is that sometimes you work on something, becomes really big. That happened to me 3 times now in my life, and then once it becomes so big, you kind of lose control of it because it becomes public, or basically at the end, it becomes public, and then it's a very different ecosystem. Things work very different in a public company than in a private company.
Makes sense. What is the ID then? So first, the whole marketing exploration phase. So allow me to just specify it as that. Then with Warzone, it's like a new game mechanic, right? Where it's truly free to play, yet the business has other monetization methods. Because ultimately, the business doesn't make games for fun. It's business, right? It needs to make money. How does that work?
So the thing is that when we started with free-to-play, we were making significantly less revenue than a normal like pay up front. Okay, right now Warzone, just to put some numbers, is making about twice with free-to-play than with the box product. Okay, why
like box product, is that like when you just pay $60 for the disc and install?
Yeah, correct. So let's put some numbers on the table. So if you take all the Halo series to date, they've made about 5 billion. If you take all the GTA series to date, it's about 6 billion. If you take Candy Crush to date, it's probably about 9 billion. If you take Fortnite, about the same figure. If you take League of Legends, about 13 something billion. So what I mean is that the highest numbers in revenue per game comes from free-to-play games, not box per game.
Okay, that's cool.
So that's the reality today. So it's a superior business model. How did we achieve that? We achieved that with a relatively simple, at least that's how I tackle that. I guess like many people in other places tackle it in different ways. But for me, the principle was, if we offer the product for free, we will get more people playing. That seems like quite a bold statement. Okay, my second thinking was, if we don't limit the spenders to $60 and we allow those who want to spend as much as they want, the average will be higher, the average spend will be higher than the spend that they are making, the ones that they buy the disc. And that had to be proven. That's what we didn't know. And it happened to be the case, because that's why now free-to-play games and service generates more. But it was as simple as that. Like, and also related to the second one, the more people playing, the more likely I am to spend.
As like a personal competitive element?
It's because if you feel part of a broader group,
sure,
the likelihood of you finding someone who is sharing the experience is higher. Therefore, your attachment to that product will be higher.
Yeah, makes sense. So,
sorry, I read a stat the other day that 80% of all of the revenue from gaming comes from microtransactions. Is that true?
Well, that's microtransactions. So how we structured the model was, in the very early days, we basically measured the time and we set a price per every minute. And then you could either play free or you could cheat by buying time. If you bought time, the time had a price, you will have to buy. If I want to buy, I don't know, 3 hours of the game rather than playing, I will pay that much to the company. I will cheat and progress 3 hour equivalent of gameplay. So that was all the foundation. And that means that if the game has enough time to buy, I can spend as much money as I want in the game. And that's super important, because that's, for example, why games like Candy Crush can defend themselves versus new games. Like Candy Crush has probably more than 5,000 levels now. Therefore, if someone starts and wants to buy all the time up to the 5,000 levels, that's a lot of money to spend. And they will probably be able to play and enjoy the game for quite a while. So that makes a very sustainable business. Now, if you create a clone of Candy Crush, until you have those levels at the same quality, it will take you out too much effort. So even if your game maybe is slightly better, but you have very few levels, you won't be able to compete, because your players will enjoy the game, will get to the end, will buy the time. And at that point, they will get bored because there's no game to play, and they will jump to another game.
So what's the psychology behind these games? Because ultimately, I don't play any video games, but for me, it doesn't make sense to play a mobile game for like even an hour a day. Is it just the competitive element, or is there like some kind of addiction element to it, that they come back, they need to log in every day to get something like treatment? Or
so the way it works is that basically you have 3 competing processes, okay, on every level that you play. What we found that was very interesting is that, and that's very important to understand experiences overall as humans. When you have an experience, our brain treats them timelessly. So let me try to explain that, and then I'll go back to how we manage engagement. So imagine that you have two kids and they want to play, they will play the same game, PlayStation game, okay? And the kids are actually the same person in this experiment, okay? The first one goes, plays the game, and can play as much as the person wants. And let's say that plays, and after 6 hours gives up the game. They are just bored, they just don't want to play more. Now, the other kid can only play 1 hour per day. What's interesting is that we found that both will end up playing 6 hours, because our brain kind of resumes the experience to where it left. And that means that you kind of have an amount of time that you are willing to, let's say, experience something like entertainment, like for how long I
Sounds
want
difficult.
Yeah. So what we do is we have 3 processes on every one of the levels. So let's say in Candy Crush, okay, when you play a level, we look at how many times you will play this level. An average player will play this level until gives up. How many times will the average player play this level until the player pays for the level, and how long it will play the level until it passes the level. Okay, the ideal level is one that it takes ages to pass, so you will repeat the level over and over again. It will take even longer to give up, so basically you don't lose anyone, and quite a few players actually end up paying to buy up the time to pass the level. So basically, based on those measures, we create the different levels. We created this scientific model that allows us to tell the designers, this is a good level, this is a bad level. They create them and then they optimize them until the experience is really good.
So maybe in simple terms, that the game is for the user, but the business is more like data science in that case?
It's a mix, yeah. At the end of the day, it's a mix of both. You use data science to make the game better. No?
Yeah.
Players like to
and more profitable, maybe.
Correct, which is very correlated to quality. So when we looked at a lot of experiments, and for example, one thing that was very interesting was that we look at what was correlated to the revenue. Okay, we looked, for example, at the marketing investment. We looked at the investment on the production and things like that. And the only thing that we found that was correlated to the revenue we're getting in the games was the retention on day 14 divided by day 7. So what that is it's a pendant. Okay, so that means that if you are very stable, it means that people are willing to play the experience over and over again. While if it looks like this, people will give up soon. So we were not even looking at how much the game was making. We're just looking, we found that the correlation was at retention. So that really tells you whether a game will be successful or not, is whether it's sticky for the players or not.
Yeah, that makes sense. So all this, well, I mean, wealth of experience, right? And knowledge, it sounds all quite intimidating, really, that you have acquired and built, now moving into Web3. And obviously the main question is, why? And follow-up question on that is, of course, it could be another experience, but this is like a whole infrastructure piece, right? Your own blockchain. How did you come up with it? How did you make that connection? There must be like a main mover behind that.
Yeah, so first thing was the goal. Like when we started, the last thing I want is, you never know how it will go, but of course you don't want to fail, okay? My goal was the only way I can win, or those trying what I'm trying, we can win. The current, basically you have two setups, no? Let's look at the mimics of what we were saying before, no? You had the pay up front versus free to play, you know? The only way free to play will win if free to play becomes a more sustainable and better business model in the future. Otherwise, we will still be buying box products. Box products were great because they controlled how you vote them. You will go to the shop, they will control which boxes are displayed. They will control the reviews. So basically the publisher has so much control over their sales that was very tempting to stick to that model. The bad thing about that was that innovation was being killed. If you look back at those, if you ever do a storyline of games, you'll see that from all that period that until I will say, let's say 2009 or so, that free-to-play games start to jump in, you have a long period of about a decade or more where there is no innovation in games. There's like just so few cases of innovation. And that was because how the market was controlled. Those who, like myself, that are curious and creative, we didn't like that. And I'm really happy that that was changed over time. So I see something similar, like the current market is getting very mature. It's very predictable what the type of things to do and how processes are going to organize, etc. And there is many people that feel very comfortable and say, let's not change this, let's keep things as they are. And there are others like myself that say, but we could do it better. We could do it better for everyone, for the players and for ourselves. Why don't we do that? You know. So that's where we enter in this phase of experimenting. When I started thinking about this, the first thing was like, what do I need to create this? I need a business model for the games so that it works better, and an infrastructure that allows the business model to work. So that's where we started saying, okay, looking at everything, and we looked at a ton of options. We checked, I don't know, more than 50 different chain options. And finally, we came up with a decision, which was a hard decision to make, that we have to actually create our blockchain if we want to achieve our goals. So that's why we set up the G4AL chain.
That's an interesting one. Let me tell you with a question there. So you said you navigated through 50 different options. What was the unique factor that made you make the big move, right? The ambitious move to add number 51 to that list? Because there must be some big USP that you think you have that others don't have.
Yeah, the foundation will be that I felt there was a significant inconsistency between, I felt like there was a lot of marketing needs, like people trying to say we're decentralized and this and that, and in reality, like for example, Immutable X, which is a key competitor, okay, Immutable X can ban the user if they want to.
Which one? What is it called?
Immutable X. It's
Immutable X. Yeah.
Okay, Immutable X. That's a very popular blockchain for games. When we look at it, just to put a practical example, had several issues. One is that at the end of the day, they can decide whether they ban or not the user. So it's quite centralized, but they suffer all the pains of a public and a private key, which for many of the players, that's a significant friction if they want to start playing. They also have the database, like the ledger, which for me is the most important thing on a blockchain, is where you see all the transactions. That's stored by themselves, like presumably in a secure way, but for me, that's one of the key things. Like I like from Ethereum that I go and I say, if I transfer an NFT from myself to yourself, I go, I download the block, and I look for the transactions in that block, and I can see our transaction. That's not the case in those type of technologies on top of that. Plus, in Immutable X, you don't have the flexibility to create freely and easily contracts, okay? So that basically what you have is a very fixed set of, like, that's what I will guess to an extent it's called, basically what they're doing is you create this NFT and then I transfer that NFT to someone else. I cannot create lots of variants of code on top of it to make it more interesting. And I'll get back to this because that was a requirement for the business model. So all of this made, for example, a technology like Immutable X not really functional for us. In the case of, for example, Mythical Games, which was another like key competitor, the problem was that on one hand, they are thinking about crazy things like at least Immutable X takes 2% on the marketplace. In the other case, you cannot, like as Immutable X, you cannot create custom contracts. But on top of that, Mythical Games, they are thinking about taking about 30% share of the marketplace operations. That for me is crazy, like going back to the Apple model, and that's really
30%. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a little too crazy.
Yeah, I don't know where they will settle at the end. I hope that they end up with a lower that, but I've heard from parties that that's what they were thinking. So plus, in the worst, like in the case of Mythical Games, they don't even make public the blockchain, so you don't even know if they are actually using blockchain technology. So it's significantly worse.
So transparency is basically one of the main things, right? So the user should be able to use the ledger technology as public or as transparent as the foundation of the ledger technology should be.
Well,
to your opinion?
A blockchain at the end of the day is a ledger. It's an open ledger.
Yeah.
You see all the transactions stored in a ledger, and that happens over time. It's protected, so that as time goes by, it's more and more difficult to change the ledger.
So why do you think that Immutable X, for example, or others might not facilitate that, if that would be the principle of blockchain tech?
It's because how the technology is based. In that case, it's a layer 2. They could try to, well, they have an explorer, a block explorer. So somehow that's at least partially done. In the case of, while it's not well protected, I will say, but that's at least partially done. In the case of mythical games, it's not even done. So it's not even visible, the block explorer. So you have all the grains of shade, like you have Ethereum that's pretty open, visible, and clear everything. You have Immutable X where it starts to get a bit less clear, and they can ban the user, and it's like significantly less decentralized, let's say, because you have a centralized party that manages the whole thing. And then you have the other extreme where it's fully centralized. We don't even show you the blockchain, the ledger. So we felt like, from a gamer standpoint, what you want is there is the basic things, like I want easy access, I want a lot of uptime, and that things run as in a normal game. So I don't see not just because I play a blockchain game, things go slow and so forth. I also want, like some of the community will be willing to do tools like to analyze the blockchain ledger and see who has what and create. I mean, that's what, like, people like to explore and create things. Like there is a community in any game playing community that create like enthusiast games. They create tools for the game. They create like lots of different things, no? And then we believe that this transparency is really good, because I'm sure there will be part of the community that will be building tools on top of all of this to create their own utilities. Then,
I mean, that makes sense. Let's refer back to Immutable X, probably the best example, right? Huge at the moment, right? The last 2 months, they've been signing a lot of games. Their head start, maybe, I don't know how long they've been around, 1.5, 2 years, something like this. Because that ties into Luke's question in the chat about Phantasma, for example. Of course, in the white paper, it states, after completion of the public sale on CDFI, the TGE will follow within 3 months of that closing round, right? The market conditions, right? That's one thing. I don't want to go too much into those details right now. I want to learn more about the product. But how is it so different? Because I read in the white paper that the first 2 games launching are basically your own products on your own blockchain. Is that something that would counter Immutable X, or how do you see that triangle? Why is it comparable, the 2 chains, or is it not comparable?
Well, I think to understand this, it's very important to understand something about the game industry, or any actual entertainment industry. So the success of a platform is determined by the quality of the products running on that platform. So when you look at, for example, consoles, okay, you can have different consoles. In many cases happen that the console that had the best hardware didn't won the one that had the best games. Okay, so that's very important. That's why we're creating the games. The games will prove the quality of our solution. Okay, every solution has a trade-off, like exactly which one is better. It's very arguable. What's very important is what games run on that. So what we are really trying to do is to get those kids in our chain, which will be what will create value for our chain. And I can explain you the strategy we have both in first-party and third-party products that are currently in development, why we're doing those products, and what's the goal of each one of those products. So what we're really after with the products is to grow our community so that a lot of people is actually using the G4AL chain. Now, why G4AL chain actually makes sense for me as a chain, why we've created it as the main choice, is basically because it's a lot more accessible. So from the beginning, we don't have public-private key because we saw a lot of issues with, like, currently, as I mentioned, things like Immutable X are already centralized. There is a lot of solutions also on other chains that do login password to make life easier to gamers. For me, all that is a lot of risk. In our case, we're doing login password and 2FA, but that's managed by Google. So yeah, of course, you have to trust a centralized party to manage your login password, but in this case, you're trusting Google. Many of the people that we expect will be joining our blockchain already have a Gmail account. So if they trust Google for that, and that,
yeah, because that's probably like 99.9% of the population, huh?
I don't know, but especially in games, that will be very high.
Yeah.
So what we're doing really is a very pragmatical approach. You know, like seeing what the consumers need and offering a solution for that. We're not pretending to, like, if you look at the Immutable, like they will sell like the platform. That happens to many others. We are decentralized, and by matter of fact, that's not the case. You know. And there is all this effort about how much decentralized something is and so forth. And the reality, just to be very clear, is in the future, this will change. And that's what we're after. In present, if you want to do a fully decentralized game, you need to have the game code and the game assets decentralized. And it's very limited the type of games you can do. If you look at even the simplest game that I've done in my career, as of today with the current blockchain technology, cannot be done decentralized. Now, as soon as you acknowledge that, is okay, but we're on the way of that. Like as it happened with free-to-play games, it will take years. Yeah, we'll get there, but let's just start moving into that direction. That's what we want to do here. So
would you say it even matters, the whole decentralization? I know we discussed it on our previous call last week. I did have a huge argument in my community where I preach centralization myself. Ultimately, with like the user registration, even if you would have in-game rewards or anything that the user can claim, there has to be at some point, I don't want to say KYC, but there will be centralized storage data about user patterns and user activity. And that centralization, ultimately, there's one party, the game, that controls user data, because that's what the game is. Any portal you log in, I think those are your exact words, if I recall correctly, because I used that on somebody else. It's ultimately coming down to a little bit of centralization. I feel personally that currently platforms that push decentralization are only pushing it because that's the narrative in the market right now. That's the crypto hype.
Yeah, right? That's why, and for example, and then all of this, and then Ethereum goes to proof of stake, which is like you're starting to go centralized when you start doing those type of things. So there is a lot of inconsistency there. I think it's decentralization in a game will be also, if you ask me. Things that from a technology standpoint, we're really far from there. Like it will take more than a decade until we can do the type of games we like in a decentralized way. So right now, I think it will take some time. It's I don't think it's either or. It's like let's consider what we have today with blockchain technology today. Okay, if we want to do games, we have to acknowledge that the games will be managed by a centralized party. You have to trust that centralized party, because the assets will not be stored in a decentralized way. The code of the game will not be stored in a decentralized way. So as soon as that happens, then you have a centralized party managing your game, so you trust them.
Would the user even care at all about any of this?
Today, no, because it's not possible to have any practical application. In like many years from now, there will be possibilities to do pretty cool stuff in a decentralized way. But like the thing is that in the short, medium, and I will say pretty quite long-term future, it will be in games centralized. The only way to have a proper game experience. You want the game to be fun and to have a lot of joy. And I think it will be a process, like a step by step. And I think like wanting everything on day zero, that doesn't happen. I can put you the example of free-to-play. Like first we had the first game were ads. Then on .com we had micropayments, so we moved to .com. Then because we started with iOS games like iPhone games, for example, and you will have a free deck and a paid deck. So basically in the free deck, you will upsell the game on the paid deck because you didn't have micropayments. You couldn't get someone to do a payment in the game. So we had the free deck and that will upsell the paid deck. Before that, we had the ads. Then from then we went to .com, where they had micropayments, and we started with this experimentation of selling time that I explained. And then that was micropayments were implemented on the mobile phones, and that's when I was at King, and we had this huge explosion with the mobile phone games adopting all the micropayments. That when .com, of course, .com went to Facebook, and then to the mobile phones. And this process takes time, and then we did a lot of improvements with the model on the refinements on the mobile phones, the business model, and that in total was about 10 years. And that is in a situation where the technology was way easier, I will say, than blockchain today, but it's quite similar to another extent, because for you to have an idea, back then there was no Amazon Web Services. We had to have our own machines. We were managing, if I'm not wrong, something like 40-50 million monthly players. That's a lot of traffic to handle. It's complex from an operations standpoint, especially when you have to have the hardware at home. Then I remember that Amazon Web Services appeared. We started using that, but was failing. So we reverted to our own infrastructure, and then years later we then went back to Amazon Web Services. So I see in blockchain something similar. Like, you have the infrastructure part that's in very early days, really. As it happened with all the social games, etc. And then you have all what will be the games themselves and the business models that are also in the very early days. So you have all these problems with the payment systems, how you buy something, how you sell something. There's a lot of issues there. All the regulation is tricky. All the infrastructure is in very early days. So I think what I mean is that, for me, this is just the start. Like, many people criticize Web3 and so forth based on the current status, and I think what many don't realize is that this will just evolve and improve until at one point one will be Web3. It's like, weren't things like this always? Like,
is the time frame for you in that case the 10 years based on the tokenomics? Because that would make sense for your vision.
Yeah, if you ask me, based on my experience in Web2, if I have to do an analogy, it will take longer this time, until like the whole thing is really advanced. I think we'll have business models and things that are more profitable in Web3 than Web2 pretty early on. I expect that to achieve that as soon as next year. So that we'll have, but to get the full process on Web3 and more decentralized, like proper big products and so forth, that's a long journey that will take a long time.
So if I understand correctly, the whole G4AL chain is basically, I don't want to call it a massive experiment, but maybe it is basically an adoption process where you would continuously build and improve where you navigate. And then these games that you're launching, they're like little experiments on their own, like that?
Oh, yeah, it's right now, if you look at the Web3 ecosystem, as I was mentioning, there's no game that in Web3 that's making more revenue than Web2 game, like a proper one. Like, if you look at the top, like Axie Infinity, for example, and you look at Candy Crush, to put one game, they are not even comparable in terms of business. So there is no, and that's the best reference in Web3. Sure. But that doesn't mean that some companies are, I don't know, selling NFTs up front and getting some money. Just what for, really? When you build a business, you want to look at the long term. How much are you making like 10 years from now? You want to see a sustained revenue stream. So that I think is and if you want, I can explain the games we have planned, the first two, and you will understand. Please. Like these two games have a very strong rationale. Okay, I will start with Elemental Riders. Okay, this game, we're doing something very different to what we see in the market. Okay, the biggest difference is that anything that's purchased regarding the game, let's say a player buys an NFT, or another player buys some time to speed up a process, or another player goes and buys a chest with some items in it. Okay, I will say most of the games that money will go to G4AL as the game developer. In our case, that money goes to a pool that is then distributed among all the gamers. So that's a significant difference. The second big difference versus what we see in the market is that when we will have a free-to-play and a play-to-earn version. When a player plays a free-to-play version of the game, if they buy a skin, for example, that money cannot be an NFT because of the regulation of the, like, for example, the Apple market or the Android market. Okay, you can see, put an example, if someone wants to check like Theta Arena, okay, you see a skin, you buy it, and then that money goes to the platform. They also have a massive, they say 30-70, but then you also have the missed transactions, etc. So the developer ends up getting like 60% of the revenue that goes in, and that's for the developer. In our case, if someone does that transaction, that money goes to the free-to-play to earn, from the free-to-play to the play-to-earn players. Okay, so that is also distributed. That creates more revenue to be distributed among that group. And then finally, the other thing what we're doing that's different, that's related to what I was mentioning about contracts and immutable X and what I was saying for us to adopt that network, is that we'll have a new set of contracts that basically what they do, and I'll explain it in abstract, and then you'll be able to play that in a few weeks from now. Imagine that I have two stones, one in my left hand and another one in my right hand, okay? And they are NFTs. And I ask you which one you want, you wouldn't care because they are two stones.
Both of them.
Yeah, okay. So, okay, yeah, well, that's an option. But basically, if I tell you the one on my right hand has gone twice around the world and gone to the top of the Mount Everest down, and so you will see that that one has more value because there's more effort put on that that other stone. So that's what we're doing with our NFT. So besides all of this money that goes in, at the end, people will be able to put time on NFTs, and the NFTs then will gain value. And that's very important because that will allow us, like those with high disposable income, to purchase time from people that has less disposable income, and then therefore they want to work for the other.
Like a business foundation rule. If you don't have money, invest time. If you don't have time, invest money.
And also part on this loop is a battle pass. So if you want to be part of this loop and earn by playing, you have to buy a battle pass, and that also creates a sustained revenue, and that revenue also goes back to the players, so we don't get money from the battle pass. In that game, the only way G4AL makes money is that if a player wants to buy time from another player, so they want to buy something they've worked on, G4AL takes 2% on that transaction. And
okay, now I'm going to ask you probably the most obvious question that you get all the time. How do you make any money if you give all your money away?
It's because in this specific case, we're really doing a game for the players. So we are getting enough money to get the game running. We make our money, in this case, from the use of the chain. So basically, we're creating a very strong reason for those gamers to play our games. Any transaction done in our game is done with Game Gold token, which is the platform token. So if we have, let's say, 100,000 guys playing the game because it's the best game for earning, doing play to earn, plus the game is fun. If any of those 100,000 wanted, I don't know, even if they just wanted, if they just needed 10 Game Gold token to play, to do some activities in the game, that will be 1 million Game Gold token that will be absorbed by the game at a value of $1. If the Game Gold token was $1. Now, so if you put that community higher, there is more demand for Game Gold token. And now I'll explain you the strategy in the other game, which really is about a real business.
Can I ask one question before we move to the other game? So the initial monetization is adoption of the game that drives demand for the utility token, the value appreciate, your treasury holds the tokens, and then you get operating income.
Yeah, basically in that case, we won't even we don't even plan to make money on that game. We just want the game to drive traffic to our chain and to prove that.
Sure. Okay. Maybe for like
let's say.
Yeah. For all the retail investors out there, you're not a charity, you're a business, right? 2% transaction fee. I don't know how much it costs to develop a blockchain. I assume a lot. You seem like a very smart man. You probably have a big team supporting you. So where does the initial money come from? On the tokenomics, I tried to do some math. It's about 9 million on the race, right? Is that enough for a blockchain, or what does that look like?
So I'll explain. So that's where the second game comes in, which is the one that generates revenue. Okay. So basically, the first one sets the basis, sets a foundation for what will be free-to-play games as a service, and creates as the game itself, like as a shareholder, you will then get any return. If you're a token holder, you get a return because that game creates a use for the token. Okay, so basically,
right.
a token holder then is offer demand. So if there is demand for the token will go higher. So what we're doing with this fair game is to consolidate the blockchain, and the best way to do that is to create a token that's used, and people will see, oh, okay, that token has, like, people are trading it, they are using it. Because it's a token that's used. It's used in that game that's really focused on play to earn and works really well for those that are willing to play a play to earn game. Okay, so that creates this utility. Now, the second game is very different. That's as I mentioned, it's more of a Web 2 game. That's the space that I'm very familiar with. So what we're doing there is 53% of Candy Crush player, and I think in the case of Royal Match gets close to 60. Okay, are male. Okay, and usually around their late 30s. So if you look at the graphics of those games, they are definitely not appealing to that user base. So what we've done here is we have in the team Javier León, who is an Emmy Award Nominee for the Credits of the Crown. And what he is doing is these really amazing like visuals on virtual jewelry. So what we'll have is that you will enter a mansion, and you have to create the mansion and decorate it. A very luxurious one with super cool graphics.
Now, mansion, right?
Mansion, yeah. Sorry, yeah. And then as you progress, you do all the areas, like you do the reception, you do your cinema.
We're going to build the Playboy mansion.
Yeah, correct. Build your own thing, and then once you get to the end, you start the league. And it's a Teams league. So and all of this is Web 2 it's proven to work. Okay, and players play with leagues. So far the only difference we have is the aesthetics, like these looks that are way more luxurious and so than these childish games that are out there. So basically what happens there is that in the league, in the normal Web 2, the teams that win the league get some trophies, okay, and they collect the trophies. Okay, my team has 1,000 trophies, and how many trophies has your team? And that's the debate, okay? Right. Now, that works really well. We're talking about games that make more than $500 million per year. Okay, so that's a very good business.
Okay, yeah.
For some of these companies. So what we want to do here is to change that model slightly, adding Web3. So once you get to the end league, what will happen is that we will make alliances with several top brands. We have several on the works. And then basically you will get this super luxurious item, and then it's distributed among the different teams that won. So let's say that team number 1 gets 10 items, team number 2 gets 5 items, team number 3 gets 2 items, okay?
Is it like physical goods or like NFTs?
This is an NFT, so you get an NFT.
Okay, because you say top brands, but of course I know it sounds like you can't confirm which brands those are, but is it in the gaming space? Or?
I can put an overall example without mentioning whether we have an agreement with them or not. Let's put a random brand. Let's say Chanel, okay? Okay, so basically, let's say that your team won number 1, my team is number 2. Okay, you get 10 Chanel, your different team members. Among them, there is a draw about 10 Chanel bottles, NFT bottles. Okay, and my team gets 5 Chanel NFT bottles. Now the cool thing is, because you have 10 NFT bottles, these NFT bottles are special because you can join them and get a bottle that looks way more luxurious, because we add diamonds. That's why it's called Diamond Dreams. We make it way more luxurious, the item. Okay, the thing is that at some point your team, if you decide to join and create the real cool thing, you will want my channel as well. And that's where you will start contacting me and we'll start trading. You'll be willing to get my 5 pods, so that
you need all the pieces to get the thing.
Correct. You want to get all the 15 different bottles to get the coolest possible. Once you get to the top one, we're evaluating what's the best thing to do, whether we tie that to a physical reward or something. We're thinking about an article in a very top luxury magazine like Vogue or so. So that's the kind of thing we're
bragging rights. Yeah, that's always good for gamers.
Yeah, so we're taking a model that already works and generates a lot of revenue with micropayments, where we add an end game that's already there. The difference is that we add NFTs and trading of NFTs and these composable NFTs, which make it a lot more fun. So this is the other game, and this one, of course, all the revenue goes to G4AL. Okay, so when players trade NFTs and so, that's between them. But how it works, like the business model, so that you understand, on this league that I mentioned, the different teams usually buy time to be the winner. So imagine that you have to play a game, but you didn't have time today to play, and you don't want to be like, not to contribute with your colleagues because everyone wants the channel bottles and be the number one. And then what you do is you say, okay, you know what? I'm going to spend €3 and I buy the time for today. And I'm like contributing to like with as the other team members.
Peer pressure.
Yeah, that's how it works. And plus,
makes sense.
I think I can create a lot of value from this good. Imagine that I am someone that I'm really attached to the brand channel, and I have 14 bottles, and you have the 15th bottle, the one that I need, so that if I complete it, I get this. I don't know, maybe a tour on channel. I get to know like something very special that for me is very important because that brand is very important. And I also want to be in the article in the top magazine telling me like saying that I went to that really prestigious brand and I don't know, I got to see that and got to meet that people. You know, you will be very lucky because I'm going to be willing to spend a hell of a lot of money to buy that NFT that you have. No, so this will create a secondary game, which is more a trading game, speculating game for players that can even be way beyond the ones that are playing the league. So it could be that the ones playing the league are more gamers, then they sell the NFTs for a price of 100 to speculators, but then resell it and build up value until, I don't know, 10,000. You know?
Yeah. With those assets. No, makes sense. So those are the two games that you develop. Is that in-house?
Yes, that's in-house. That's in-house.
And there you mentioned first party and third party. So I assume this is the first party part. What about the third party part? How does that work?
So right now there is two parts here. Okay, I'll start with the second one that's coming later. That's very, very relevant. And because we just talked about Diamond Dreams, that's super key. We're talking about very big players in the industry, companies that have more than 2,000 employees. In those cases, I talk to them and they are interested, but taking it very careful, like when they move into Web3, because they want to see a game that works. And works for them means you need a business model that proves that generates more revenue than the current traditional business model, and you need a legal framework that works for them, that they can bring at the scale. They are publicly traded companies, so that a business model and a legal framework that they can move into their corporation. So that's why it's so key, the Diamond Dreams game. If we manage to, my rationale is very simple. It's like we're going to do kind of the same offering, a bit better with the visuals, etc. As I mentioned, that will already make it possible to release a Web2 game. But then we have this end game with the NFTs. If the end game with the NFTs adds extra value to the game and ends up making more money than the average game, we don't know by how much, but let's say that we managed to make 30% more with our innovative business model than the current business models by using Web3 technology, then those Web2 players will be at risk because you can copy their game and make more revenue. And if you make more revenue in your game, what it means is that you will be able to buy or advertise the game to buy users really
on a bigger scale,
higher price than them. So you will start killing their users until they run out of users. So at that point, they will not have a choice. It's like what it happened with free-to-play. There was a point where the big players like Activision had to do Warzone, which is something they didn't want to do, like a free-to-play, because they were forced to. Otherwise, they would have disappeared because PUBG, PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, was already doing that. So they were forced to come up with a free-to-play version of their game. So I think this is what I'm trying, this move with Diamond Dreams. That's what I was saying, like some of the changes will be shorter term, other ones that are more profound will take longer. But that's what I'm aiming with Diamond Dreams. And with the first one, I just want to prove the market, like, because there is a lot of concern about, there is a lot of scam and things like that.
Right.
I'm trying to do a game that's play to earn, that if someone plays, like imagine that I'm a reporter and I download them Elemental Riders and I want to write, this is another scam, blah, blah, blah. Like, I want them to be like, I cannot say that. Like, you know, like they are really frustrated. Like, actually, there are some Web3 games that are legit, you know, like that I cannot write anything wrong about them. That's what we're trying with both games, actually, with very different approaches.
Yeah, makes sense. One question though, circling back to my earlier question about funding, always an investor's favorite question, right? The burn rate, the situation, what that looks like. So let's say everything goes well with these diamond dreams. Would that mean that it could make like $50 million a year? Because I would assume that's like the ballpark range for a blockchain, the whole team, everything for like scale. And what if that game, you mentioned we want to prove the model. What if it doesn't prove the model? Is that are you going to alter the game, or do you have like another backup game with a different utility or flow inside?
Well, we'll try with different, so that will be the start, and let's see how that goes. In terms of cash flow, as you can imagine, I have a lot of experience. So I've released more than 60 games in my life, and you get to learn to be very careful about what you do. Those in the team, there are some of us that are actually doing this because we believe in it, not that much for an economical need. So that means that our operational costs can be reduced by, we are willing to take a sacrifice ourselves in terms of pump. That also makes our production capacity to be significantly higher than what will be normal, considering the staff that the company has. That's a major thing. Another one is that from a cash flow perspective, we are always really, really careful about planning, and every dollar we spend. There's been, I don't know, like a ton of attempts of a scam, a ton of attempts of like grabbing like a lot of money from us, etc. We've been very serious about how the use of the money, to the extreme that right now, with the money we have at bank, we will last until summer 2024 with zero income. Okay. Now, what's very important here is that we can always do a capital increase, and that is an option.
Like sell off more equity.
Yeah. So that is a lever we have. Some of the games we release can generate some revenue. Okay, that's reasonable to think. Our token will have value. So in terms of, we have part of the pool for the platform, so we can get more developers to join our platform despite us not having income. So we can increase the game output. The number of games will be correlated with our revenue and also the value of the token, as I mentioned. Like, let's say that you can go two ways with the value of the token. You can go the way of a lot of small games using it, or a few games using it, or a mix of both. But what's very important is that if you have, let's say, 1 million games with 100 players, you have 100 million users using your token. If they, and that's a huge amount of token that will be required. Therefore, the token price will go very high. But also, if you have one single game that's like really, really large, that creates all the use of the token already in one single product. So we'll be doing both. We'll be creating more and more games, quality games, trying and refining the approach as we've always done. And then we will also have third-party games creating their games, and we'll be doing all what we can to filter and set up the quality bar for the games released at the G4AL chain, so that all of them are really good and have a chance to succeed.
So that means that not any regular company can just launch games on the chain. Like I don't know the tech, I'm not a tech guy, but on the Binance Smart Chain, I see a lot of low quality games, and I assume that anybody can just launch a game on that chain.
No, in our case, we will be a filter. So if someone wants to, we do that for two reasons. One is security. So we want the experience to be as good as possible. If you open the chain completely, from a developer standpoint, when you can get a lot of basic developers, that's fine. But especially you can get even people that has malicious intention, just wanting to create issues with your blockchain. By being more selective with our developers, that creates security for both those willing to develop, that they know that they are developing on a platform that's safe, and also those using the platform because it's stable and it's reliable. And that is very important, because one of the biggest issues we see I see, at least when I started looking at the data, I saw it was a huge issue in Web3 games, was the reliability. Keep in mind that in the case of what was Candy Crush, we aimed for less than 15 minutes downtime per year. So it's really important that the game is up as much as possible. You really want it to maximize, because we know that as soon as the game goes down for whatever reason, players are like, they just go to another game. That's reality. They want to play today, your game is not working, they download another game. That's how it works. And if the other game is better, they will leave. So it's super important that the platform that you run your products is very reliable. And if you look at reliability metrics of different options in Web3, it's a tricky part.
And to get these third parties to your chain, would you offer them grants, or would you just pitch them and hope they come?
We have different, like for example, now we have 2 signed, and one of them just, I mean, we have a really good advantage, which I didn't discuss regarding our chain. One of the coolest advantages we have is that developing for our chain is way easier and way cheaper than any other way of any of the other options. Third reason is because you don't need a Web3 developer. You can re-adapt a Web2 developer with all the software, so everything is abstracted and they don't really need all that know-how. We take care of all that part for them. And then also the time to market, it's way lower. So if you're a very small startup and you have your game ideas and you want to experiment with blockchain, our chain is the best one by far, because you will get to try your ideas way faster than with any other blockchain, and also with more flexibility, because as I was pointing out, we have contracts. Our contracts, by the way, are coded with C#, which is a language that for game developers is a lot more familiar, because 76% of the developers in the world use Unity, and Unity, the base language is C#. So you have like pretty much all the game developers in the world know C# really well, and it's a language they feel very comfortable with. So they can come up with lots of ideas about contracts and implement them.
So if they take care of the Web2 part, you said we will take care of the Web3 part. Is that to onboard them, or would you take a fee for the Web3 part?
No, it's what I mean is that when the tools we've created, imagine that you are a new developer. You've never heard of Web3 whatsoever. You don't even know what a contract is, okay? And then you just want to create some NFTs and sell them in a marketplace, and basically you want an introduction, so create something very basic, okay? Let's say that you want to do a variant of Diamond Dreams, okay? We'll have these basic NFTs and NFTs that merge and so forth. You'll be able to do all of that in a visual interface. So you go in, you create the image, you set the images that evolves to as you merge them up. All of that is done in a visual way, so you don't have to understand all the steps that are underneath. Okay. So that's what I mean in a very easy way. They don't have to write a contract. They don't even know what a contract is. They just need to know what an NFT is for them. You know, they create that.
Would you perhaps say this is like, it sounds like a really great thing for like startups and minor businesses. What about big studios that would want to control that part because they don't want to use your stuff?
Well, they can, of course, no problem.
Okay, it's optional.
More work. Yeah, of course. That's
okay.
The big advantage for big studios, I can tell you, because I've told to them, I know exactly what they want. So first one, like one of the biggest concerns they have is about all these MAA KYC. That's one thing that they really want to be covered at the chain level, because they don't want to cover that themselves. So that's one thing that they want. We're not talking like everyone has to do a KYC whatsoever. It's like in several countries, there is a set of legislation that when certain very specific things occur, the companies should be doing like certain activities to verify who is the sender, who is the receiver.
Do you have one specific example for this?
Yeah, so for example, you have the travel rule, crypto travel rule that's accepted by 30 countries around the world with different levels of implementation. And basically that says that if there is a transaction between two parties of more than $1,000, you have to identify who those two parties are, okay?
And now, is that just a wallet or email, or is it a passport picture?
Any crypto transaction, whether it's an NFT, it's
yeah. But when you say identify who's the buyer, who's the seller, but how do you identify them? Is it a passport or?
Yeah, you need a way. Yeah, correct. You need a way to identify who they are. You need a name.
But email is not enough.
Yeah, correct. Email is not enough. That's how the regulators go that way. And that is a major concern that the big companies have, because if they don't have that, they cannot make these huge games. You cannot scale that to the masses.
Sure.
Because,
makes sense.
because they can close your business. No?
Too much risk. Yeah.
Yeah. Imagine that you are a publicly traded company. You are generating billions per year. You will then, like, just to increase 30% or 50% your revenue, you will then risk all your business. Nor a G4AL want to do that. So we don't want to, I don't know, manage to release great games, make the token very successful, then take the eye and the attention of all the regulators, and then end up closing. I mean, that we don't want to happen. Not for us, not for anyone who invests on us, etc.
So ultimately, going forward, any legislation, regulations that would come over time to bring what the haters say centralization, your blockchain would be willing to work with governments and institutions to ultimately bring the adoption, but also bring the regulations forward.
The thing, Colin, is that do we have a choice? So if I have a choice, my choice will be very clear. My thing is like, that I wanted to do this. I want this to be successful. I don't want to be closed in a couple of years and have to face my investors like, look, we didn't look correctly at the legislation, and then the business foundation wasn't good enough, so we have to close now because these nasty regulators are coming after us just because they are not. I don't know. I don't think that's responsible. So reality, despite of what I believe and what I think as an individual. Okay, if I want this business to be successful and go through the steps of reaching mass market and adoption and so forth, the current way to go is to understand what's coming, and I think that needs to be respected. As I said, you can put that to a minimum. That's very important. Like, see where, like find the right. Just use that when you're forced to use that. But I think it's important. And as time goes by, things will evolve. I mean, let's see where we are in 10 years now. It's very difficult to see where all the legislation will go. As I was mentioning, all this part reminds me a lot of credit card payments, micro payments on the very early days.
It's a process.
It was unregulated and it took time, and then it's very similar in many ways. And it's the normal path of any technology. So,
but it's a big opportunity.
That's a very important thing for the big players, as you were mentioning. Like, asking before. So yeah, the big players really need this. The big players are also, for them, it's very important the stability of the platform. So to make sure that if you release something and then you market it, the whole thing doesn't shut down, or so it can handle the scalability that they need. And they want to see the proven business model. So if they have all of this, they see that the legal framework is correct and they have the business model, then I know that some big players will come and use the technology, because that's what they're after.
And they're your old friends. Connections.
Yeah, but at the end of
it helps.
If you don't, the people are very pragmatical. If you don't see that you will make more money on that, you don't jump on that. You know, it's like,
fair enough, but that's business.
Yeah, if you have like a company that's making $1 billion per year, you will never change that business unless you see, like, if I go to you, say, Colin, look, by doing this and that, you will make 300 million more per year, plus you don't have any risk. Then you'll say, okay, I'll go and do that. Why not? Yeah,
sure. Yeah, it's definitely about the adoption, I think. So it will be interesting, because normally when you're launching, right? You're close, you're here. You can imagine that there's a lot of investors that have a lot of questions about immutable X, but the distance is just too big. They're too big to come down and bring clarity. And I think the adoption, I mean, if you can keep it going, you must be a very busy man going forward, right? But that level of communication, even for the adoption of the games in general, you know, because I think part is not only like your explanation about centralization is super clear, right? It's actually quite simple, but people don't understand it because they haven't heard it, right? So education might as well be like a major component in the success of your chain, perhaps.
Well, you're right, because our chain is very focused on games and what the games need. So, for example, if I was planning to do a certain DeFi application, I will definitely not use G4AL chain if I want that to be decentralized, fully etc. And our chain is based on, okay, knowing the limitations of the technology today, let's make the games as open as possible, really, and as interconnected as possible by interconnecting the game with other blockchains. Really, for me, when it comes to blockchain technology in games today, not in the future, today, you can basically offer two things to the gamers. One is transparency, so that they can see that if they own something, that's public and everyone can see who owns it. So transparency is important. And the other one is interoperability. So, and that goes from basic things like, as I was mentioning before, like secondary trading on secondary markets like OpenSea or so. And also it can go to ways like game enthusiasts do all kind of things, like they will create a game in another blockchain. And then if you move an NFT from our ecosystem to that ecosystem, they could use that NFT in that ecosystem, for example. But time will tell what ideas people come with, but interoperability, I think, is very important as well. So that people can use the chain that they prefer, or they may have an idea that requires really decentralized finance. So some people decide to take some of the NFTs from our ecosystem to that ecosystem, so that that contract can be executed there. So I think for me, it's not exclusive. It's not that. It's not either or. I think it's really have all the different types of blockchains for the different purposes. What's very important is to have them interconnected so that depending on what you need at that point, you make use of that. And for games is what I was mentioning, like I think we have to be open and clear. It's like many of these blockchains are really centralized by a matter of fact. That's decentralized, but then they are paying the prices of being decentralized for validation, for example. And then because they are trying to make all these like very complicated things, making things complicated to an extent for the sake of making them complicated, they end up not having a very clear ledger, which at the end of the day is kind of one of the most secure things. Like if I make a transaction of this to you, what do you prefer? That the transaction is very validated by lots of people, okay, or that it's stored and made it public to everyone that that transaction happened. If it was very well validated that's not made public, then someone could delete the record and no one remembers that. Okay, or
you could just buy all the validators to say that you did it, but then you didn't do it.
Well, if actually what happens is I give this to you and this all of the time is made public and everyone knows it and it's distributed all over the world, then that gives you a lot of security. So I think
that's the future.
At least that is an approach that I think for games will work really well for quite many years until technology evolve and we can do cooler things. But think about the CPU and bottlenecks today, etc. To do games on the blockchain, the games that I'm used to develop, as I mentioned, I think it will take more than 15 years to be able to have.
Oh, that's okay. It's a journey. One thing that we do know, it will take between 4 and, what do you say, 20 years, and everybody will be playing games for a living on the G4AL blockchain. That's the ambition, yeah?
Well, the ambition for me is that we change the perception of Web3 gaming, and that becomes mainstream gaming. So now it's a niche. It's about 600,000 players that play Web3 games. It's 3,000 million players that play games. So it's not even 1 in every 3,000 that plays blockchain games. I think we want to change that. If we include also those games that have a free version, that will increase, but still will be a very minority, a very small number of gamers that actually are into Web3. And that's okay. That's the current status, and that's what makes it fun and why people like myself. I think there will be more others doing the same. We want to go and change the current status as we've done in other occasions, in other markets.
Yeah, I mean, if you've done it once, you can do it again. Let me yeah, Mr. Thomas, because I know I have more questions on tokenomics, CDeFi. We'll do that next time because you'll be back, right?
Okay.
Manel, I'd like to ask one question.
Yes.
You're basically simplifying the process for blockchain to get mass market gamers across to Web3. The height of Web3 gaming, we had 10 million gamers actively playing, and that was largely down to Axie Infinity. I thought, how long do you predict before we're at 10 million gamers back on Web3? And does the bear market play any significance in you attracting gamers?
Well, that's a good question.
In my case, the bear market doesn't affect our business at all, because the foundation is about creating use of the token, and the biggest main use of the token will be, on one hand, you have elemental riders that has its own reasons to exist, but then especially on the other, you have Diamond Dreams, that it's really a normal game. It's like, I want to have fun, I play Diamond Dreams. All of a sudden I discover all this thing about the NFTs, and then I start needing game gold token and so forth. So if the market goes up and down, that won't make me play or not a game. I play the game because it's fun, not because the crypto market is going up. So because of that, I don't think we will get. I'm not too worried about.
Because gamers want to play games and investors want to earn money. Is different audience.
Correct. I'm sad about that because I have some friends affected sometimes, and I feel sorry for them. But from a business perspective, I don't fear that.
So Manel, just another quick question. So you obviously know more about attracting users to mobile games than any of us. So if Diamond Dreams is a success and Elemental Raiders is a success the way you feel it could be, how long would it take us to get to potentially 10 million users? And you would be at the forefront of really
that's sure. You will see that before the end of next year.
Wow.
That's sure. That's sure. If you have the game,
this is being recorded, right?
Yeah, no, that's how it is. I mean, that's and you can see previous games I've done. Like if you see the growth. Once the game ticks and people find it entertaining, you scale it via performance marketing, and you scale it up to like the audience that actually likes to play the game pretty fast. So you can grow real fast.
So yeah, because I think we see such a huge growth in blockchain gaming and play to earn because of Axie Infinity, and I think it was once we realised that the tokenomics wouldn't hold up. The fact that you are giving all of the revenue back into the community, plus with your previous experience, this could be.
And in terms of users, like let's take into account that in Axie there were a lot of users that were not real users. Like we are talking in this case like real people playing. Like when we say 10 million users, it's not 10 million game accounts. And some of them managed by the same user, many accounts by one user. We're talking 10 million real players.
So more like players that actually play for fun instead of, because I remember Axie Infinity, there were like teams, guilds. It was just like work. It wasn't fun. It was just work, grind out the game just to get money.
Yeah, we'll have that for, as I mentioned, like there will be secondary markets and opportunities for that. The foundation will be real, like players just having fun. But there will be other ones that will play around like with speculate and so forth. I put the example of the NFTs. I put the example on the elemental riders where you will also have this play to earn, actual real play to earn foundation on it.
Colin, that poster behind you, is that elemental raiders?
Yeah, that one we have a couple.
The Fire Lord, it looks like Ragnaros from World of Warcraft. Do you know that design?
Correct. Yeah.
That looks really good.
Our team, we have a couple of ex-Blizzards, and they really like that game and all of that ecosystem. Yeah, actually, it's looking really good. I'm not sure. I will have to ask Marc when we plan to release the next update, but it's looking really good. I can tell.
Exciting, Mr.
Colin,
Thomas.
Can I ask you a question? You've probably sat down with a lot of AMAs from Web 2 that are trying to come over to Web 3, but the reason why we're supporting the project so much is because I don't think we've come across such an accomplished and successful CEO from Web 2 that's got a well thought out plan, even through to the fact that, he's not quite going down the full decentralization route. He knows where it needs to be decentralized, where it should be partly permissioned. And the fact that he's put a blockchain around this, what do you think? How does
Yeah,
it
no,
compare?
I think obviously when you, well, like we had like a 2-minute conversation about it, as we usually do, really short. And it was like, yeah, Candy Crush. And I said, Candy Crush is a mobile game, isn't it? It's like, I've heard about it. My mom might have played it once. And then he said like, yeah, it's about, 1.2 billion EBITDA a year. And I was like, wait, what? That like from a business point of view, from an investor point of view, that's interesting. Like, oh, this is this guy. And then the other experience, and he sent me the white paper. I read through the team, and of course also the backers so far, right? Very impressive overall. So then you go deeper, then we had our first conversation, and then you realize, some of these models, in my opinion, right, just my personal opinion, for the crypto space, it's about emphasizing revenue models, or what we would call cash grab, or emphasizing growth models for adoption, right? And I feel like here we're more on the adoption. And I believe that the next push will be crypto gaming, right? I'm not really into the whole metaverse thing. It's not really for me. I don't really know what that means. But the crypto gaming I believe in as an adoption model, because I've played a lot of games, not anymore, fortunately. But so the one thing that triggered me to basically, talk more with Manel, investigate the project, was when you said there's value in NFTs that have perceived value. So I recall so well. You know anything about World of Warcraft, Manel?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I know.
Yeah. So what I flex with, so I have a Swift Tiger mount achievement, right? I have Invincible Rhines, I have Mimran's Hat, all these like gamer things that are super exclusive. You need to grind them out for maybe years, right? Before you get them. Once a week, every half an hour, for years. And I was like, well, what if that would be an NFT? I could sell that Swift Tiger for, I think, at least $5 million. Right? It would be massive because nobody got that, and I have it, but I can't trade it because Blizzard owns it. So I truly believe that when you set like the time capsule kind of thing inside an NFT, it just makes so much sense to me, right? And I think that's like a thing that you cover quite a broad spectrum where, beginner gamers, advanced gamers, but also the investors that will obviously kick off your project. It's just a good story. So I don't want to sell it, right? But I'm just saying, you're here for a reason, because I like the project and I want to know more about it.
Yeah, we're trying hard, and we'll know more as we get to the market and see. We basically have theories that make, I would say, sense, but we have to verify them. It's like, as I was pointing out last time, was like, if we make game free and we don't set a max amount of money to be paid, we can make more revenue because there will be more people paying, willing to pay more. It was as simple as this. In this case, is kind of the same very basic arguments. If you can play the same game that you loved before, but now you can make some money, you will pay the new offering because
Why not?
that's fun, and I can make some money.
Yeah.
Rather than winning all the money in the company, I get some money for myself. It makes a lot of sense, no? So, okay, now let's make it happen, and that's very difficult. That's what takes time, iteration, a lot of focus, and trying different things. And I hope we can.
Yeah.
Well, that's
perhaps maybe that's one of the major 3 elements that I like, that the realistic point of view. We have this vision, we have the experience, now we're going to try it, but there's multiple scenarios. I don't want to name the project, but I obviously review, well, even for Andrew, he sent me projects sometimes, and they have these crazy visions, and I'm like, what's your experience? What's the team's background? It's just some hype. And I'm like, well, of course, I always say, what if it goes wrong? These are the alternatives. But I've seen, let's say, decentralized VCs. We operate a decentralized VC with a smart contract, the funds, and they're saying like, oh, we're going to incorporate on Wall Street with a hedge fund. I'm like, no, you're not. You don't know how that works. You don't know how much money that costs. But these hype announcements, that's what the community is about, right? And I'm like, if you oversell the hype, then it's going to implode. And specifically with crypto, which is really sensitive still, right? Like you said, scams, hacks. The Ronin chain got hacked, Axie went down hard, right? It happens. That's part of adoption. That's part of evolution, of pioneering things. But if the founding team or the executives are not realistic that these things might happen, then I think it increases the risk for investors and reduces the trust.
I think you're completely right, especially on things like metaverses. Like my first experience with the concepts of metaverses, that I was working with Hawkins in 2007. I get to learn like lots of attempts he tried even at 3DO. We did some work on that, and we released a product in that space back in 2008 or so. It was basically we concluded that there were, and I know the founder of Second Life, I know the founder of EVE Online, I know the founder of well, basically of Electronic Arts. So in the case of Hawkins, that was also the founder of 3DO, that they did a lot of work on some attempts on that. Metaverses really are, if they are for, as of today, if they are for adults, and I got to know some of the people that work, some of the top management of Roblox. So if they work for adults, the cohort of players that you end up having is people that are disabled and cannot enjoy the real life most of them. You know, like
Fair enough, makes sense.
Well, but
Because they can finally walk around.
The people playing Second Life today, a lot have that, and that's for them great, because imagine that happens an accident to myself and I cannot enjoy life as I can do today. Having that door to a wall, that's great. The thing is that the number of people in that situation is limited, so therefore the business possible in that it's limited. Okay, you have a limited amount of money you can make with that, and it's quite reduced because of the number of users in that situation. Now, for kids is different. That's where you see Roblox. So kids are way more open-minded. So when you get adult, you create a mental map of the world, and you are less willing to explore. So you kind of have a fixed set idea of things, and then you go for that. Kids want to explore. That's why Roblox is enjoyed by kids, and basically it's a sustainable business model for them. It's still making less revenue than the other games that I mentioned. I think Roblox, they made probably about $3 billion, something like that. I will have to check. But basically it's less lucrative than all the other business models, but at least that works as a metaverse. The thing is that when you think about Web3 metaverse, that's a metaverse for adults. And as of today, I know of no metaverse for adults that actually works and is sustainable. So I'm not saying that that won't be possible. I actually would like to experiment with metaverse at some point with G4AL, but I know that the barrier is super high. It's like you're trying to do something that no one has cracked before. And that is very ambitious, and people have tried hard, and I know a lot of very smart people who have tried, and some have succeeded, but the level of success is always below a normal game. Significantly below a normal game, like 1 out of 10 in the top success cases. So,
but maybe like if you look at something like Sandbox, for example, they're laying the foundation for something that will occur 30 years from now, right? Perhaps if I look at Sandbox, I'm like, okay, this is a Minecraft. Why the fuck would I do anything here? But it's more, if you go into the material, it's more about creating the possibility to create something of an experience, right? But when we talk about metaverse and people moving in AI, brain capacity, whatever crazy terms they use, I don't want to say that's light years away, but I don't think we're going to see this in this lifetime.
Could be, and related to this, like when I thought about it, did some brainstorm about metaverse at some point to see whether, but I say, okay, later on, not now, I don't have, but it was also the ideas that I had. I also was invited to the place where the creator of PUBG lives, with several top executives from the games industry, and where we did several brainstorm sessions on metaverses and whether they are possible, when they will be possible, etc. And we reached very similar conclusions in regarding all this space. What I think, and I want to explore at some point, is related to these NFTs where you can put time on them. So if the metaverse is built rather than a metaverse that's pre-built without effort, like the Centralization you were pointing out, it's built by the actual users, I think that can create more value. My idea was more like a metaverse where people start and there is nothing, and people have to kind of build it themselves by putting time. And that way you will have those who pay, the ones that build the space, and those who invest later on. But that will be more like real value, because I see now at the end of the day, you just click a button, create a massive amount of land, and people buy.
Yeah, so that's when I say when people talk about metaverse, I'm just like bored about it, because I think when I hear metaverse, it's like a reason to raise 400 million and then create a 2D game and call it a metaverse.
To an extent, that's what we see in Fortnite in some cases. But I think it will be possible. So but I think for us, for example, it's not the time right now. We have to go for more tangible things, set up a very solid foundation, and then like if Diamond Dream succeeds, we can start exploring that. If not, we keep trying with this type of products until we get a really good sustainable income. That should happen, I expect, in the next year or so with my experience.
Yeah, no, I like it. Very business focused. Let me not take all of your evening, Manel, but I appreciate you going very much in detail about your project. As I mentioned before, next time on the follow-up, I would love to talk about the race, the seedify, what that looks like, the tokenomics, and then I'll try to see if I'm actually smart about tokenomics. We can have a little discussion on the opportunities and how you see the economy scale moving forward. Andrew Thomas, thank you for attending as well and your interesting questions.
Thank you so much for having me.
And we'll see the both of you, I think, soon. So will be a nice little follow-up. Do enjoy your evening. I will basically provide this everywhere. I'll let you know if there's any additional questions that come in and we can pick them up next time.
Thank you so much.
Perfect, Colin.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers.
Cheers. Have a good day. Cheers.
Bye-bye.